Hello, and welcome to another glorious math lesson by yours truly, Mr. Thompson. Brought to you in part by Party Dog Wrapping Paper. So, we're going to be going over lesson 9-4 today. So if you haven't already, go ahead and load up 9-4. And we're going to go over some notes that you need to know prior to doing your lesson. So, this whole time we're going to be solving quadratics with graphing. So what does it mean to solve something by graphing? So if you're looking at your lesson, they give you 3 examples, okay? When we're solving for x, we're actually solving for when it crosses the x-axis, okay? So how many times it crosses the x-axis, if it crosses the x-axis, and what points it crosses at. So the first example, 2x squared equals 0. You would actually graph y equals 2x squared, so we substitute out 0 for y, and we get this graph. When we go into problem number 1, you'll learn how to graph these a little bit better, but right now we're just understanding. So trust me when I say, if I were to graph this, it would look like this. So how many times does this graph cross the x-axis? Just once. So how many solutions do we have? 1. What is our solution? Well, what is the x value at that point? So we have the point 0, 0. What is the x value? 0. So what is our x solution? 0. Now, look at this graph. If we were to graph 2x squared plus 2 equals 0, we would change it to y equals 2x squared plus 2, and it would look like this. Now, does this graph cross the x-axis? No, it hovers above it. So, is there any solution? No, there is no solution. Why? Because it does not cross this line. So, even though we have a point and there is an x value, it does not cross the x-axis. Because again, we're not after the vertex. And then finally, the third example, and the most common example you will see, if we have 2x squared minus 2 equals 0, we swap the 0 out for y equals 2x squared minus 2, we would graph that, and as you can see, it would look like this. And how many times does it cross the x-axis? I see 2. What are those points? -1, 0, and 1, 0. So we have 2 solutions where it crosses the x-axis, and our x values are going to be +1, -1, or +1, -1. Okay, it doesn't really matter which order you write the solutions in. Alright, but just know that there's a positive and a negative answer for these cases. Now, we find our solutions by seeing where it crosses the x-axis. That is highly important for this lesson. Okay, so this is going to be the first part of today's lesson, and then we go into the second part of today's lesson. So you have to solve with square roots. So again, I hope you guys are familiar with your square roots. If not, go watch the video previous to this and get familiar with square roots again. Another thing that you are going to have to do later on in this week is going to be factoring, so you might want to get accustomed to factoring as well. So, moving on, solve with square roots. When you see equations like this, you treat them just like you would if there was no squared here. You just solve for x. So if you had this problem, what would you do first? I would add 75 to both sides to get rid of the 75. And then I would divide by 3 to get rid of the 3 and solve for x. So that's exactly what we're going to do first. So I rewrote the problem here, and then the opposite of a -75 is a +75. So if I want to get rid of this -75, I need to add. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So add 75 to both sides. And I get 3x squared equals 75. Now this 3 is multiplying this x squared, so what's the opposite of 3, or opposite of multiplication? Division. So if I want to get rid of this 3 right here, I'm going to divide by 3. That's why we see that fraction. And what we do to one side, we do to the other. So that cancels that, and this can be simplified. So step 2 was divide by 3 to both sides. Then we have x squared equals 25. Now, we would normally be done, but we still have this squared. So just like I said, what's the opposite of a negative? Positive. What's the opposite of multiplication? Division. What's the opposite of a square? The square root. So if I want to kill this square, I need to square root it. What I do to one side, I have to do to both sides. So if I square root this and I square root this, this takes out this squared, and I get x on this side. What is the square root of 25? 5. And now we have this plus or minus business. So again, you can write it out like this. This is just a new symbol. It literally stands for plus or minus. Or you can write it out like the way you normally do, plus 5 and minus 5. Okay. But why did we have a negative answer and a positive answer? Why did we end up with 2 answers? Well, just like this example up here, if we were to graph this, it would cross the x-axis twice at 5 and negative 5. So again, you don't necessarily need to really graph each and every single one of these to understand that. The rule of thumb is if you apply this radical sign, if you are the one who draws the square root sign, then you need a plus or minus. That's the rule. So it'll make more sense. Let's go on to problem number 1. So if you have Canvas up and running, it should have informed you that you need to graph these to solve. Okay? So they give you a Desmos chart and you need to type in this equation. Now remember, when we type this in, we need to substitute out the 0 for y. So we're really graphing y equals x squared minus 1. So if you're struggling to type that in because you don't know how to do the exponents, you do x, and then you do this symbol, which I believe you hold shift and hit the number 6. That's what it is on my computer. And then you press 2, and it'll give you an exponent. And then you hit the arrow button, the right arrow button, and then you can do your minus 1 equals y. And that will graph it. Okay? Let me know if you're struggling to do that. It should be fairly simple. And then we get this graph right here. Now, if you're looking at Desmos, these points right here will be in gray. That outlines your solutions. So that outlines where it crosses the x-axis. So in this case, it crossed at positive 1, 0. So positive 1, 0. And negative 1, 0. So what is my x value here? 1. And what is my x value here? Negative 1. So my answer is 1 and negative 1, or plus or minus 1. And now on your question, they already put in the plus or minus, so you are just putting in the number 1. Okay, so I hope that clears up the confusion with the plus or minus. All right, moving on to number 2. Okay, so there is no solution. I wanted to let you guys know that right off the bat, but I want to explain why. So it really is important to see this one graphed out. So again, 2x squared plus 4 equals 0. Swap out the 0 for y and type this into Desmos. That's how you would graph it. Okay, follow the same rules here. So I would do 2x and then shift 6 to get the exponent, type in 2, then press over, and then plus 4. The plus sign is attached to the equal sign, so you will have to hit shift and then hit the equal sign to get the plus sign. Okay, but essentially you're just graphing this line, or this parabola. Now, what does it look like? It looks like this. It looks like a parabola, a smiley face, and it starts right here. The vertex is at positive 4 on the y-axis. So does this cross the does this cross the x-axis? Does it cross this line? No. Then there is no solutions for this graph. There are no real solutions, so no solutions. Okay, moving on to number 3. This is our last graphing problem, and it's another important one because it really shows a fundamental thing. So we have x squared minus 16 equals negative 16, right? Notice that unlike problem number 1 and problem number 2, it does not equal 0. So before we do anything else, we have to make it equal 0. So if I want to get rid of this minus 16, what's the opposite of a minus 16? A plus 16. What I do to one side, I have to do to both sides. So I do it to both sides. Negative 16 plus 16, 0. Negative 16 plus 16, 0. And that's okay. Zeros are fine. We're okay with that. So x squared equals 0. Now we're going to type this in and graph it. So swap out the 0 for y and type in y equals x squared and graph and see what you get. You should get something that looks similar to this, with the gray point or the vertex being right there at the center, at the origin, 0, 0. So how many times does it cross the x-axis? It touches it right there one time. So we have one solution. So what is that point? That point is 0, 0. So what is our x value? 0. So what is our answer? 0. And we are done with the graphing portion. So as we move on, there's an example to show you that we will be using square roots as well as an application problem. Go ahead and scroll down to number 4. And you should have t squared minus 25 equals 0. So just like on the notes, what are we going to do? We're going to solve for t squared. We're going to solve for t squared and get it all by itself first. So what is stopping t squared from being by itself? This negative 25. So that's what we have to go after first. So I rewrote the problem here. The opposite of a negative 25 is a positive 25. What I do to one side, I need to do to the other. So negative 25 plus 25 gives us 0, and 0 plus 25 gives us 25. So these cancel, and we brought down the t squared, and we have t squared equals 25. Now, what is the opposite of a square? A square root. So if I want to get rid of this squared, I need to square root. But if I do that to this side, I need to do it to this side. Okay, so notice this is the same exact problem as I used in the notes. Okay, so you should already know where we're headed with this. So I square rooted both sides. What's the square root of t squared? T. What's the square root of 25? Plus or minus 5. Now again, since you applied the radical sign, you need a plus or minus answer. That is very important, okay? So they already write the plus or minus sign, so you just need to write the 5. Now, it's very easy to get confused with this. If you are just writing 5 all the way down on all of your answers, or you're not really worried about this plus or minus, when they don't actually write this out for you, you might get confused and get the problem wrong. So just be aware that that is supposed to be there. They have already included it on Canvas. All right, enough over-explaining. Number 5, okay, notice there's no work yet. So I really want you guys to try to follow along, try to do this on your own as I go. So I will go a little slow, just please be attempting to do this on your own. Can you just wait and get the answers? Absolutely. Is that going to help you on your practice or on your tests or quizzes? No. Will that help you next year or the year after when you go into geometry or algebra 2? No. So might as well just take the time. You're already watching the video. Just do it with me. So step 1, I need to get n squared by itself. So I need to get rid of this positive 12 and I need to get rid of this 3. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to get rid of this 12. The opposite of a positive 12 is a negative 12. What I do to one side, I do to the other. Now, what should my next line be? So, I would bring my 3 n squared down. What is 12 minus 12? 0. They cancel out. So I'm going to bring my equal sign down. What is 12 minus 12? Also 0. Now, we can't just have an equal sign floating around, so we do need to write this 0. Now, think about the next step. What is stopping n squared from being by itself? I see this 3 right here. What is this 3 doing to n squared? Is it adding it? Is it subtracting, multiplying, dividing? It's multiplying. So, what's the opposite of multiplication? Division. So if I want to get rid of something that's multiplying, I need to divide it. So let's divide 3. Now, what I do to one side, I need to do to the other. This cancels this, and I bring down my n squared. Now, if you have a pizza and there was 3 slices of that pizza and you ate all of those slices, how many slices are left? 0. So 0 divided by 3 is 0. That's okay. It is a number. We can use it. Do not be afraid of 0. Now, what's the opposite of a squared? So if I want to get rid of this squared, I need to square root. What I do to one side, I need to do to the other side. So this square root sign kills this squared, and we're left with n. What is the square root of 0? 0. And that is our answer. Now, I hope you would ask yourself, well, Thompson, why did you put a plus or minus on this one if you wrote out a rule that says you need to have one, but then you don't write one here? Well, ask yourself this. What's the difference between a positive 0 and a negative 0? If someone gives you $0, did you gain any money? If someone takes away $0, do you lose any money? So while you could write plus or minus 0, it is completely not necessary in this case. Okay, so 0 is that rare exception where you don't really need to follow that rule. If you did, are you wrong? No, not at all. You can write plus or minus all you want. Okay? But it is just not needed, so we simplify it and just erase it. All right, number 6. This is our last one of these problems. So again, take the time to write this out. And I hope that you can solve this one on your own by now. All right, so I will be doing it. Don't fear. So here we go. What should your first step be? Again, use these as examples. What should your first step be? What's the opposite of a negative 32? A positive 32. So if I wanted to get rid of this and put it over here, I need to add. So plus 32 on both sides. Plus 32 on both sides. All right. Now, I did nothing to the 2g squared, so I'm just going to bring that down. Minus 32 plus 32 cancel each other out. I can bring my equal sign down. What is 0 plus 32? 32. Now, what is stopping g squared from being by itself? This 2. What is this 2 doing to g squared? Multiplying. What is the opposite of multiplication? Division. So if I want to get rid of this 2, we need to divide it. What I do to one side, I need to do to the other. So this kills this. We have g squared equals, and I'll do the division for you, 32 cut in half, or 32 divided by 2 is 16. And then finally, how do we get rid of squares? We need to square root. So if I square root one side, I need to square root the other side. And this becomes just g. Did we add the radical sign? Yes, we drew that. So I need a plus or minus. And what is the square root of 16? It's perfect, it's nice, it's 4. Now they already wrote the plus or minus on this problem, so all you need to type in is the 4, and you're good to go. All right, moving on to our last problem. We have an application problem. I know, you guys love these ones. They're absolutely amazing. No one ever has frustration with these. I'm aware. I probably don't even have to cover this in the lesson, but I am anyways. So here we go. It says a city is planning a circular fountain. The depth of that fountain will be 3 feet and the volume will be 1,800 feet cubed. Find the radius of the fountain using the equation V equals pi r squared h, where V is the volume, r is the radius, h is the depth. Round to the nearest whole number. So as you're reading that, there are a few things you need to focus in on. Okay, the first is they give you a formula. So right off the bat, you should be writing that out. The next thing that you need to focus on is they tell you what the volume is. They tell you what V equals in the beginning on sentence number 2. It says the volume is 1,800. It also says the height, or the depth, is 3 feet. What they don't tell you, but what we already know, is what pi is. Pi is 3.141596, blah, 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 blah. So you just focus on the 3.14 and just realize that that is a value that we already know. So let's substitute all of these in. V is 1,800. I brought pi down because I don't want to write out the decimals. I brought r squared down because we have no idea what that is. And we do know what h is, it's 3, so I plugged 3 in there. So this is what we're working with. Okay, already looks significantly easier. Now, where do we start? We can have hieroglyphics, it doesn't matter. When two things are smashed together, what does that mean? Multiplication. What's the opposite of multiplication? Division. So no matter what, if we want to get rid of the things around r squared, we need to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. So I'm going to get rid of this 3 first. So if I want to get rid of the 3 that is multiplying, I'm going to divide it. What I do to one side, I need to do to the other. This 3 kills this 3, and we're left with pi r squared on this right side. 1,800 divided by 3 is 600. Now, again, it does not matter what pi is or what is next to r squared. What is it doing to r squared? Multiplying. So what is the opposite of multiplication? Division. What I do to one side, I better do to the other side. Now, right here, I hope you guys are writing down this work and following these steps, okay? I went ahead and used a calculator for you guys and typed in 600 divided by pi, and I already did all of the arithmetic for you. So just follow along with the steps and try to keep up. So this pi takes out this pi. 600 divided by pi is 190.986. So if you were to type that into the calculator, you should get something like that. Okay? What is left after we cancel pi out on this side? Just r squared. Now, just like the problems above, even though this isn't a nice number, who cares right now? We want to get rid of the squared. So what is the opposite of a square? A square root. What we do to one side, we better do to the other side. So if I take the square root of r squared, I just get r. Did I apply this radical sign? So I better have a positive or negative answer. And then I typed in the square root of 190.986 into a calculator, and I got 13.8. So let's be very clear here. Are we dealing with a real world problem? Yes, we're dealing with a fountain. We're solving for the radius of that fountain. Can we have a negative radius for the fountain? No, distance can never be negative. So we are only going to take this positive answer. Again, if this was just another problem on your homework and it wasn't a real life problem, you would need both plus and minus, but since this is a real world problem, we are only going to take the positive. So the answer is 13.8. But wait, there was one more important fact that the problem told us to do. If you type this in, you will get it wrong. This is not the right answer. The last part of the problem, if you read the instructions, if you read the directions in the problem, the last portion says round to the nearest whole number. So, what do we actually end up with? If you're rounding 13.8 to the nearest whole number, this is 5 or bit more, so we need to round up. So we have r. Since we rounded, I'm going to use a fancy squiggle equal sign. All that means is approximately, or that we rounded, okay? Not that important. And our answer is 14. And that's it for the lesson. So again, let me bring you back the notes, okay? Take a screenshot, take a picture, okay? Use these as examples as you go through your homework. It should be fairly straightforward, but go ahead and send me an email or message me if you encounter any problems that are weird or you are struggling with, okay? So again, have a great day. I hope you guys are staying productive and not getting cabin fever, and I will see you next time.